My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 35 years old. If someone had asked me a year ago whether I thought my marriage was solid, I would have smiled without hesitation and said yes. Not perfect, no marriage ever is, but steady, safe, built on years of shared routines, inside jokes, and the quiet comfort that comes from believing someone knows you completely. I was wrong. Sometimes a marriage doesn't collapse because of screaming matches or betrayal. Sometimes it begins unraveling with a single sentence, spoken so casually that you don't realize it has lodged itself inside your heart until much later. Mine began with 6 words. Just stay quiet next time, Emily. At first I thought he was only frustrated. Looking back now, I realized those words carried years of disappointment I never knew he had been collecting. My husband Ryan Brooks and I had been married for 8 years. We dated for 2 before that, after meeting through mutual friends at a charity fundraiser. Ryan could make conversation with anyone. Within minutes, he'd know where someone grew up, what they did for work, and somehow have them laughing. I admired that about him. I was different. I preferred listening before speaking. I liked conversations with substance rather than noise. If I contributed something, I wanted it to matter. I never considered those differences a problem. Opposites balance each other, or at least that's what I believed. Ryan loved hosting people, dinner parties, weekend barbecues, wine tastings, holiday gatherings. Our house rarely stayed quiet for long. I wasn't naturally drawn to large social events, but I showed up because they mattered to him. I'd help cook, set the table, refill glasses, ask thoughtful questions, listen more than I spoke. I honestly believed I was being a supportive wife. 3 weeks before everything fell apart, Ryan invited 3 couples over for dinner. There was Ethan, one of his longtime friends, another couple from his fitness group, and his closest female friend, Olivia, who arrived with her husband, Daniel. It felt like every other gathering we'd hosted. Soft jazz floated through the speakers. Candles flickered across the dining table. Someone opened an expensive bottle of Cabernet Ryan had been saving. Conversation bounced from vacations to work promotions to home renovations. Halfway through dinner, politics entered the discussion. I usually avoided political debates because they rarely changed anyone's mind. But Ethan confidently mentioned a recent policy change that simply wasn't true. Not exaggerated. Not a matter of opinion. Just factually incorrect. When everyone paused, I smiled politely. I actually read the legislation last week, I said. The policy was revised, but not the way the news headlines made it sound. I briefly explained the actual change. Nothing dramatic, no lecture, no sarcastic tone. Ethan blinked, laughed softly, and shrugged. Guess I should stop trusting random headlines. Everyone chuckled. Someone changed the subject to baseball. The evening continued normally. At least, that's how it looked. After midnight, once everyone had gone home, Ryan and I stood together in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. He stacked plates harder than necessary. I noticed his jaw tightening. Finally, he spoke. Did you really have to do that tonight? I looked over. Do what? Correct, Ethan. I frowned. He said something that wasn't accurate. That's not the point. His voice wasn't loud. It was controlled, which somehow hurt more. You made him look stupid. I wasn't trying to. But you did. I placed another wine glass carefully into the rack. He didn't seem offended. Ryan sighed. You always have to be the smartest person in the room. The words landed harder than I expected. I don't think I'm smarter than anyone, but that's how it comes across. I stared at him. I answered because the information was wrong. Emily, he rubbed his forehead. These dinners aren't classrooms. I know. They're social. I know. People don't want to feel corrected. I searched his face. So, you wanted me to pretend he was right? I wanted you to read the room. His eyes finally met mine. You make me look bad in front of my friends. I actually laughed once. Not because it was funny, but because I couldn't understand what I'd just heard. How do I make you look bad? Because you're my wife. He folded his arms. When you make people uncomfortable, it reflects on me. I wasn't trying to make anyone uncomfortable. You don't have to try. Silence stretched between us. The dishwasher hummed quietly. Outside, the porch light attracted dozens of tiny moths, fluttering against the glass. Finally, he spoke again. "Just stay quiet next time." He said it gently, almost kindly, as though he were offering helpful advice. I searched his expression for some sign he didn't mean it. There wasn't one. Instead, I found relief. He genuinely believed this would solve the problem. I swallowed the ache building inside my chest. "All right." His shoulders relaxed immediately. "Thank you." That hurt most of all. Not the criticism. The relief. As if silence was the version of me he'd wanted all along. That night I lay awake while Ryan slept peacefully beside me. Memories surfaced, one after another. The company holiday party where he'd whispered that I looked too serious. The barbecue where he'd suggested I laugh more, because I seemed intimidating. The birthday dinner where he later said I'd killed the mood by refusing to laugh at a joke mocking someone's weight. At the time, I'd brushed those comments aside. Now they lined up like pieces of a puzzle. Maybe this hadn't started tonight. Maybe he'd been trying to edit my personality for years. Maybe I'd been helping him do it. 2 weeks later, Ryan announced another dinner party. Same group, he said while checking the guest list on his phone. Plus 2 couples from work. I nodded. "You'll come." "Of course." His smile returned. "And..." He hesitated. I finished the sentence for him. "I'll stay quiet." The tension disappeared from his face. "Perfect." He kissed my forehead. "Thank you, Em." I smiled back. But something inside me had already gone frighteningly still. I had promised to stay quiet. And this time, I intended to follow his instructions exactly. The night of Ryan's second dinner party arrived with the kind of polished perfection he loved. By 6:30, the dining table looked like something from a lifestyle magazine. White linen napkins were folded beside gold-rimmed plates. Candles burned low in glass holders. A playlist of soft acoustic covers drifted through the house, while the scent of rosemary chicken and roasted vegetables filled the kitchen. I had helped with all of it. I chopped onions, arranged the appetizers, chilled the wine, and made sure the guest bathroom had fresh towels. Ryan moved around me with nervous energy, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting. "Do you think we need another bottle of red?" he asked. "We have 5. "Right." He checked the table again. Then, he looked at me. Not casually, carefully, as if trying to decide whether I was about to cause trouble. I smiled. "Don't worry," I said. "I remember what you asked." His expression softened. I'm not worried, but he was. The first guests arrived just after 7. Ethan came with his wife Melissa. Olivia and Daniel followed a few minutes later. Then came 2 new couples from Ryan's office, Brandon and Claire and Jason and Natalie. I greeted everyone warmly. I took coats. I offered drinks. I smiled at jokes. I behaved exactly the way Ryan wanted. Pleasant, helpful, quiet. At first, no one seemed to notice. The living room filled with overlapping conversations. Brandon told a story about a disastrous business trip. Melissa described renovations they were planning. Daniel complained about the traffic downtown. Normally I would have asked questions or added something relevant. That night I only nodded. When Ethan asked how my week had been, I said busy. He waited for more. I took a sip of wine. "That's it?" he asked with a laugh. "Pretty much." Ryan glanced at me from across the room. I couldn't tell whether he was pleased or uncomfortable. Maybe both. Later, Brandon asked if I had seen a documentary everyone at his office was discussing. "No," I said. "You'd probably like it. It's about misinformation and how quickly false claims spread online." The irony almost made me smile. Sounds interesting. Again, I left it there. Conversation moved on. By the time dinner was served, I could feel Olivia watching me. She had known Ryan longer than I had. They had met in college and stayed close through jobs, relationships, and eventually both of their marriages. Olivia was observant in a way Ryan wasn't. He noticed whether a room was entertained. She noticed whether a person was hurting. I kept my eyes on my plate. For the first 20 minutes, everything went smoothly. Then, as if the universe had arranged the moment specifically for me, the conversation returned to the same policy Ethan had misunderstood at the previous dinner. Brandon mentioned a news segment he had watched. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "That's exactly what I was saying last time," he said. The new law means companies can completely avoid reporting those numbers now. It was still wrong. Completely wrong. For 1 second, instinct took over. I almost opened my mouth. Then I looked at Ryan. He was watching me. The warning in his expression was subtle but unmistakable. So I lowered my eyes and cut another piece of chicken. Ethan continued explaining the policy incorrectly. No one interrupted him. Ryan relaxed. That small movement told me everything. My silence mattered more to him than the truth. Across the table, Olivia's eyebrows drew together. She glanced at Ethan, then at me, then at Ryan. I kept eating. A few minutes later, the conversation shifted to travel, but the atmosphere around Olivia had changed. She wasn't following the discussion anymore. She was studying me. Finally, during a brief lull, she set down her fork. "Emily." I looked up. "You've been really quiet tonight," Ryan answered before I could. "She's just tired. Long week." Olivia didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on me. "Is that true?" Ryan laughed lightly. "Of course it is." I asked Emily. The table grew slightly quieter. Not silent yet, just attentive. I folded my hands in my lap. "I'm fine." Olivia tilted her head. "Are you sure? You usually have interesting things to say. I feel like we haven't heard your voice all evening." Ryan shifted beside me. "Olivia," she said, "she's fine." I looked at my husband, then back at her. "Actually," I said calmly, "Ryan asked me to stay quiet at these gatherings." Every sound in the room disappeared. No forks against plates. No glasses being lifted. Even the music suddenly seemed too soft to cover the silence. Olivia stared at me. "What?" I kept my tone even. After the last dinner party, Ryan told me I embarrassed him when I spoke too much. He said I made him look bad in front of his friends. Ryan's face changed instantly. The color drained from it so quickly that for a moment he looked ill. "Emily," he said, "that's not what happened." I turned toward him. "You said, 'You make me look bad in front of my friends. Just stay quiet next time.'" Claire looked down at her plate. Jason reached for his wine, then seemed to think better of it. Ryan's mouth tightened. "You're taking one sentence completely out of context." "What context am I missing?" "You know what I meant." "No," I said. "I don't think I do." His eyes flashed. "I meant that you should be more aware of how you come across." "To whom?" "To people." "Which people?" He opened his mouth, but Olivia spoke first. "Did you actually tell her to stay quiet?" Ryan turned to her. "She embarrassed Ethan at the last dinner." Ethan nearly choked on his drink. "What?" "You remember," Ryan said, "when she corrected you about the policy." Ethan looked between us. "I didn't care about that." Ryan blinked. "You were uncomfortable." "No, I wasn't." "You looked uncomfortable." "I was wrong," Ethan said. "That's probably why." A strange tension moved around the table. Melissa placed a hand on Ethan's arm, but he continued. Emily wasn't rude. She explained it, I laughed, and we moved on. Ryan stared at him as though he had betrayed some unspoken agreement. "That's not how it felt." "To you," I said. His head snapped toward me. Olivia leaned back slowly. So nobody was offended except Ryan. "That isn't fair," he said. Her expression hardened. "What part isn't fair?" Ryan pushed his chair away from the table slightly. "Emily can be condescending." I looked at Ethan. Was I condescending? He shifted, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. But after a moment, he shook his head. "No." I turned to Brandon. "Have I been condescending tonight?" Brandon raised both hands. "I barely know either of you." "That's a no," Olivia said quietly. Ryan's breathing changed. Faster. Shallower. "This is exactly what I was talking about," he said. "You always have to make a point. I've barely spoken all night. And now you're humiliating me in front of everyone." I answered a question honestly. "You could have handled this privately." "We did handle it privately. You told me to stop talking." "That is not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" His lips parted. No answer came. Olivia looked at him with something worse than anger. Disappointment? "I've known Emily for almost 10 years, she said. "I've never once thought she was embarrassing." Ryan stared at her. "She's thoughtful. She listens. She doesn't talk just to hear her own voice. Honestly, I wish more people were like that." "Thank you," I said. Ryan stood so abruptly that his chair scraped against the floor. Everyone flinched. I need some air. He walked through the kitchen and out onto the back patio, slamming the door behind him. For several seconds, no one moved. Then Natalie murmured that they had an early morning. That was all it took. Within 15 minutes, everyone had gathered their coats and made hurried excuses. Ethan apologized to me, though he had nothing to apologize for. Claire wouldn't meet my eyes. Daniel gave me a quiet nod before following Olivia toward the door. Olivia stayed behind. When the others were gone, she stepped closer. "I'm sorry," she said. "You didn't do anything." I asked the question. "You asked because you noticed something was wrong." She looked toward the patio door. "Has he done this before?" "Told me not to speak, no, but made you feel like you embarrass him." I hesitated. "That's been happening for a while." Her face fell. "How long?" "A couple of years maybe. Small comments. That I'm too serious. That I ruin the mood. That I don't know how to act around people." Olivia closed her eyes briefly. "Emily, there's something you should know." A cold feeling spread through my stomach. "What?" She lowered her voice. "Ryan has been complaining about you to us for months." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" "He makes comments when you're not there. Says you're difficult at parties. That you judge everyone. That he has to manage you." My throat tightened. "Do people believe him?" "I don't know," she said carefully. "But he's been repeating it long enough that it feels like he wants them to." Behind us, the patio door opened. Ryan stood there, his eyes red and his expression unreadable. Olivia gave my hand a small squeeze. Then she left. The front door closed behind her. Ryan and I stood in the ruined dining room, surrounded by half-finished plates and melted candles. And for the first time in 8 years, I looked at my husband and wondered how long he had been telling a version of our marriage that I had never heard. The silence after Olivia left felt heavier than the argument itself. Ryan remained beside the patio door, one hand still resting on the handle. Behind him, the darkness outside reflected against the glass, turning it into a mirror. For a moment, I could see both versions of him at once. The man standing in front of me, and the husband I had believed him to be. "Is it true?" I asked. He looked away. That was answer enough. I stepped around the table, slowly, careful not to knock over the abandoned wine glasses. "How long have you been talking about me behind my back?" "I wasn't talking behind your back. Olivia said you've been complaining about me for months." I was venting. To everyone, not everyone. The distinction almost made me laugh. "Who then?" He rubbed both hands over his face. "Emily, can we not do this tonight?" "No. We're doing it tonight." His eyes hardened. "You already embarrassed me in front of an entire table of people. Isn't that enough? You told them I was difficult before I ever defended myself. That's different." "How?" "Because I wasn't trying to humiliate you." "Then, what were you trying to do?" He didn't answer. I looked around the room. The candles had burned low. Sauce had dried along the edge of a serving dish. Someone had left a folded napkin on the floor. An hour earlier, the room had been carefully arranged to impress people. Now it looked honest. Messy. Exposed. "Did you tell them I judge everyone I asked?" Ryan folded his arms. "I said you can come across that way." "Did you tell them you have to manage me?" His jaw tightened. "Sometimes I feel like I do." The words struck deeper than anything he had said before. "Manage me? You don't understand social situations the way I do." "I understand them perfectly. I just don't perform in them the way you want." "That's not fair." "No, Ryan. What isn't fair is spending months convincing your friends that your wife is a problem, then coming home and pretending nothing is wrong." His expression cracked slightly. "I never said you were a problem. You said I needed to be managed." I was frustrated. "About what?" He paced toward the kitchen, then back again. "I don't know." "That's not good enough." He stopped. His voice rose. "Because everything with you feels so serious." I stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means sometimes I want to have fun without analyzing everything. I want to tell a story without you pointing out that some detail doesn't make sense. I want to make a joke without wondering whether you'll think it's shallow or inappropriate. I don't police your jokes. You don't have to. Your face does it for you." I felt my chest tighten. "So my expressions embarrass you too." He closed his eyes. That's not what I'm saying. It sounds exactly like what you're saying. He sat down heavily at the table. For the first time that night, he looked exhausted rather than angry. I look at other couples, he said quietly. They're always laughing. They're spontaneous. They're fun together. And we aren't. We're comfortable. The word landed like an insult. Comfortable, I repeated. I didn't mean it badly. Yes, you did. He looked up. I could see regret in his face, but regret was not the same as understanding. You wanted a different wife, I said. No. You wanted someone louder, someone more entertaining, someone who would help you become the couple everyone notices. That's not true. Then why have you spent years criticizing every part of me that doesn't fit that image? Ryan looked down at the table. His silence confirmed what his words would not. The next 3 days passed like winter inside our house. We spoke only when necessary. He slept in the guest room. I didn't ask him to come back. On Monday morning, I found a coffee mug outside the guest room door. He had left it there overnight, a faint brown ring staining the carpet beneath it. Normally, I would have cleaned it. Instead, I stepped over it. That afternoon, Olivia called me. I almost let it go to voicemail. When I answered, her voice was cautious. I've been thinking about what happened. So have I. I need to tell you more. My stomach turned. How much more? She exhaled. Ryan has been making comments for about 6 months. Maybe longer. What kind of comments? That you're no fun. That you never want to go anywhere. That you make people uncomfortable. He told Daniel once that he sometimes wishes he had married someone more outgoing. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. Did anyone defend me? I did. So did Daniel. Ethan told him you were fine. But he kept saying it. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Her voice broke slightly. I thought it was normal venting. Couples complain sometimes. I didn't realize he was saying those things to you too. He wasn't. Not directly. That was what hurt most. Ryan had been honest with everyone except me. That night I confronted him again. He was sitting on the edge of the guest bed with his laptop open. Olivia called. His face changed. What did she say? That you told people you wished you'd married someone more outgoing. He closed the laptop. I was upset when I said that. But you said it. Yes. I stood in the doorway. Do you know what I've been doing for 8 years? He said nothing. I attended every party, every work event, every vacation with people I barely knew. I helped you host. I smiled when I was tired. I made conversation when I wanted silence. And somehow you told people I never tried. I know you tried. No, you know I showed up. You just decided it wasn't enough. He stared at the floor. I think I built an idea in my head, he said finally, of what marriage was supposed to look like. He told me about his parents. They had been the center of every gathering when he was growing up. His father told stories. His mother laughed loudly. People described them as magnetic. Ryan had spent his life believing marriage was supposed to be a performance 2 people gave together. And I had failed the audition without knowing there was one. The following week, he suggested counseling. I agreed not because I believed therapy could save us, but because I needed to know whether anything real remained beneath the resentment. Our therapist was a calm woman named Dr. Maya Chen. During the first session, she listened without interrupting. Then she turned to Ryan. It sounds as though Emily has participated in your social life for years. She has. So, when you say you want her to be more social, what do you actually mean? Ryan hesitated. I want her to enjoy it. You want her internal experience to match yours. I guess. Dr. Chen nodded. That isn't asking for participation. That's asking her to become someone else. Ryan's face tightened. Then Dr. Chen turned to me. And you've been accommodating that request at the expense of your own self-worth. The sentence made my eyes burn. Over the next 4 weeks, we unpacked years of small injuries. Ryan admitted he had compared us to other couples. I admitted I had swallowed my hurt because I feared conflict. He confessed that the more dissatisfied he became, the more he exaggerated my flaws to justify it. Then, during our 4th session, Dr. Chen asked him one question. Do you want to be married to Emily, or do you want to be married to the person you keep hoping she will become. Ryan stared at the floor for a long time. I waited. Dr. Chen waited. Finally he whispered, I don't know. Something inside me broke quietly. Not dramatically. Not all at once. It was more like a thread, snapping after being stretched too long. I looked at my husband, and realized that his uncertainty was the clearest answer he had ever given me. Ryan moved out in June. There was no dramatic fight when he packed his things. No shattered glasses, no accusations hurled across the room, no final attempt to make one of us the villain. He folded his clothes into 2 large suitcases, while I stood in the hallway and watched 8 years of marriage disappear into neat, organized piles. At one point, he held up a navy sweater I had given him for our 5th anniversary. Do you want this? He asked. I almost said yes, not because I wanted the sweater, but because some irrational part of me wanted proof that our life had existed. Then I shook my head. It's yours. He folded it carefully and placed it in the suitcase. When he finished, he stood by the front door with his keys in his hand. I'm staying with Olivia and Daniel for a few days, he said. Just until I find an apartment. I nodded. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Olivia, the person who had exposed the truth, was now helping him figure out what came after it. Ryan looked around the house one final time. The framed wedding photograph still hung in the hallway. In it, we were laughing beneath a shower of flower petals, both of us certain that love alone would be enough. I'm sorry, he said. I believed him. That was the hardest part. He wasn't cruel in that moment. He wasn't defensive or angry. He looked like a man who had finally seen the damage he caused and understood that regret could not reverse it. I know, I said. He waited, perhaps hoping I would say something more. I didn't. Then he opened the door and left. The house became painfully quiet. For years I had believed silence was where I felt safest, but that first night alone, every empty room seemed to echo. I found one of Ryan's wine glasses in the dishwasher and stood there holding it for several minutes. I remembered the dinner parties. His hand against the small of my back as guests arrived. The way he used to whisper, "You look beautiful," before opening the door. The nights when we cleaned together after everyone left laughing quietly over things people had said. Our marriage had not been entirely false. That would have made leaving easier. There had been love. There had been tenderness. There had been ordinary mornings when he made coffee before I woke up, and rainy Sundays when we watched old movies under the same blanket. But love could be real and still become insufficient. That was the truth I had resisted for too long. We continued counseling during the separation, but the purpose changed. Dr. Chen no longer asked how we could repair the marriage. She asked how we could end it without destroying each other. Ryan admitted that he had spent years seeking validation from people who barely knew him. He had wanted friends to admire our marriage because he did not know how to appreciate it privately. I admitted that I had confused endurance with loyalty. I had treated every criticism as something I needed to fix, rather than evidence that I was slowly disappearing. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. There were no fights over money, no arguments about the house, no courtroom scene where one of us broke down. We signed papers across from each other in a quiet conference room while our attorneys reviewed the final terms. When it was over, Ryan placed the pen on the table and stared at our signatures. That's it, he asked. The attorney nodded. That's it. 8 years reduced to ink. Outside the courthouse, Ryan stood beside me on the steps. People moved around us, carrying folders, making phone calls, rushing toward lives that had nothing to do with ours. I hope you find someone who appreciates you, he said. I looked at him. I hope you learn to appreciate someone before you lose them. He flinched, but he nodded. I deserved that. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I know. We hugged once. It was brief but not cold. Then we walked in opposite directions. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. Ryan had written it by hand. Emily, I have started this letter 6 times because every version sounded like I was trying to explain myself instead of apologize. You were never embarrassing. You were never too serious, too quiet, or too difficult. You were simply yourself, and I kept treating that as a failure because you did not match the picture I had created in my head. I cared more about how our marriage looked than how it felt to you. I told people a distorted version of you so I would not have to admit that the dissatisfaction was mine. I made you question qualities I once loved. Your thoughtfulness, your honesty, your ability to listen, your refusal to laugh when something was cruel. I am sorry I saw those things as inconveniences instead of strengths. You deserved a husband who protected your confidence, not one who slowly dismantled it. I do not expect forgiveness. I only wanted you to know that I finally understand. Ryan. I read the letter twice. Then I placed it in the same drawer where I kept our divorce papers. I forgave him eventually, but forgiveness did not mean returning. It meant I no longer wanted to carry what he had done into every room I entered. The months after the divorce surprised me. I expected loneliness. Instead, I discovered space. I repainted the guest room and turned it into a reading room. I replaced the enormous dining table with a smaller round one that didn't make the house feel like it was constantly waiting for company. I reconnected with friends I had neglected, while adapting myself to Ryan's social world. And in an irony that would have made my former self laugh, I joined a book club. The meetings were held every other Thursday in the back room of a small independent bookstore. People disagreed constantly. They challenged one another's interpretations. They corrected details. No one treated thoughtfulness like an insult. For the first time in years, I spoke without monitoring Ryan's expression from across the room. Sometimes I talked for several minutes. Sometimes I said almost nothing. Both choices belonged to me. Olivia and I remained friends. She apologized repeatedly for not telling me sooner. I repeatedly told her that she had nothing to apologize for. There was never anything romantic between us, nor could there have been. She loved Daniel, and I valued them both as friends. What connected Olivia and me was not attraction. It was gratitude. She had noticed my silence. More importantly, she had asked about it. Nearly a year after the dinner party, I ran into Ryan at a coffee shop. I was standing near the counter with a novel tucked under my arm when I heard his laugh behind me. It was familiar enough to stop my breathing for half a second. When I turned, he was seated near the window with a woman I had never seen before. She was bright and animated, moving her hands as she told a story. Ryan listened with a relaxed smile. She looked like the kind of woman who could enter a crowded room and immediately become its center. For a moment, an old insecurity rose inside me. Then it passed. Ryan saw me and stood. Emily, hey. He came over and the woman followed. This is Madison, he said. Madison, this is Emily. His hesitation before describing me was almost imperceptible. My ex-wife. Madison smiled warmly and offered her hand. It's really nice to meet you. You too. She glanced at Ryan. He's told me a lot about you. I raised an eyebrow. All good things, I hope. Ryan looked embarrassed. But Madison nodded. Actually, yes. He said you're one of the most genuine people he's ever known. I looked at him. His expression softened. I meant it. Madison excused herself to collect their drinks, leaving us alone for a moment. Ryan slipped his hands into his coat pockets. You look good, he said. I am good. He smiled faintly. I can tell. I glanced toward Madison. She seems nice. She is. And outgoing. He laughed quietly. Very. There was no bitterness in me, only recognition. Perhaps Ryan had finally found someone whose energy matched his. Perhaps I had finally stopped believing that his preference was evidence of my inadequacy. I'm glad you're happy, I said. I'm trying to be. Madison returned with the drinks. Before leaving, Ryan looked at me one last time. I'm sorry I didn't see you clearly when we were married. I appreciate that. I mean it. I know. Then they walked away together. I took my coffee to a table near the opposite window and opened my book. For several minutes I didn't read. I watched people pass outside, coats pulled tight against the cold, each person carrying a life invisible to everyone around them. I thought about the dinner party where everything changed, about Ryan telling me to stay quiet, about Olivia looking across the table and asking whether I was okay. That question had sounded simple. It wasn't. It gave me permission to say aloud what I had been trying not to understand. The truth did humiliate Ryan that night, but not because I had been cruel. The truth humiliated him because it revealed the difference between the husband he wanted others to see and the one he had become behind closed doors. People sometimes ask whether I regret the 8 years. I don't. Regret would require me to believe they were entirely wasted. They weren't. We loved each other. We built a home. We shared laughter and grief and countless ordinary days. But eventually Ryan stopped loving the woman in front of him and began resenting her for not becoming someone else. And I stopped protecting myself because I mistook silence for peace. I know the difference now. At social gatherings, I am still myself. I contribute when I have something to say. I listen when someone else deserves the space. I correct misinformation politely when it matters. I refuse to laugh at cruelty simply to make a room more comfortable. And sometimes I stay quiet, but never because someone has told me my voice embarrasses them. My silence belongs to me now. So does my voice. And anyone who believes I need to become smaller to make them look better has no place at my table.